Oregon's biggest mystery remains on the defensive side of the ball.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. A look at Oregon's 2026 schedule, tiers of games. One of you with a question on that front. And Dakorien Moore, I'm so on the Dakorien Moore hype train. I don't think I can chair his fan club because that's reserved for a diamond in the rough of sorts, but I would like to. Anyway, that's on today's show. And we start with Oregon's biggest mystery post-spring is the same as the mystery pre-spring. Who in the world is starting at nickel? Drop your predictions below. I want to hear. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad guess. You know, there are other position groups Oregon has. Take wide receiver, for example. You could feasibly come up with several starting combinations that would make sense. That in a realistic strain of events play out to make it so. And it doesn't have to be the guys that I predict of J-Mac, Dakorien Moore, and Evan Stewart. If you think Iverson Hooks is starting in the slot and J-Mac is first receiver off the bench, I don't think that's a crazy proposition. If you think they're going to ease Evan Stewart back into it and Iverson Hooks starts, or Jalen Lott, who is kind of the next Evan Stewart potentially stylistically with his play as a five-star true freshman. If you think that's the guy, I can see that too. I can't sit here and tell you it's unreasonable or that you're being ridiculous, because you're not. So you can come up with a lot of different combinations reasonably, but there's an agreed upon set of, okay, Dakorien Moore is going to be a part of it. Evan Stewart looked really good. But there are ridiculous combinations in that room you could come up with. Oregon's starting receiver group will be Iverson Hooks, Gatlin Bear, and Jack Wrestler. Okay, that's a ridiculous combination. If you pick any given player that is on scholarship to start at nickel, I will not sit here and call you crazy. I promise. I promise. Now, going into spring, the guys I had identified as potential starting nickelbacks: Devon Benjamin, Trey McNutt, Carl Williams IV, Azel Benag, Trey Watson, Xavier Larice, Devin Jackson, and Jet Washington. Now, going into the spring game, my projected starter with a 2-level confidence on the good old SSA was Carl Williams IV. I want to alter that. I don't know if I should. I kind of want to. Not because Williams did anything wrong, necessarily. He wasn't featured a ton. Sometimes for a DB, that's a good thing, though. But there was someone that really stood out. But I want to start with one particular angle. I went into the game thinking, okay, here are guys that positionally or traits-wise could play that spot. And based on how certain players were employed in the game, I think we can rule them out. One of whom was my potential pivot player. But again, this is kind of a mystery room. Jet Washington looks like he is going to be a deep safety. Though physically, could he play anywhere on the field? Yes, that's why he's a 5-star recruit and such an exciting prospect for the Ducks. He played exclusively in the game from what I saw as a deep safety. Trey Watson, JUCO transfer at corner, little bit smaller, kind of in that Brandon Johnson, Nico Reed type mold. Well, Brandon Johnson was a nickel. Nico Reed was an outside corner. He appears to be more of the latter. That's where he was playing in the spring game. I think we can take him out of that spot. The other guys, though, I can still see it. And play style wise, Trey McNutt generally projects as the next Aaron Flowers. I also could see him playing some nickel. This might be a rotation. The nickel spot this year could very well be what cornerback 2 was in 2025. And that's a constant rotation is really what it felt like. You had Ife Obadegwu, you had Theron Johnson, and then they would even work in Naeem Offord from time to time. And Offord was definitely used less than the other two, but they really felt like Theron Johnson and Ife Obadegwu were on a similar level. I liked Ife more, but neither one was perfect, and neither one was good enough to beat out the other because Brandon Finney wasn't rotating in with anybody last year, but the other guys were. So Ife logged 423 snaps, Theron Johnson logged 370, Offord logged 245. Contrast that with Brandon Finney, who logged 694. So maybe this nickel spot winds up being that, where instead of a Jaden Kennedy, who logged over 600 snaps last year, maybe you have, if you figure 600 snaps again for the nickel position, maybe two guys are around 250 and another guy's around 100. Does that seem far-fetched or crazy? Right now, it doesn't to me. Now, the most experienced guy in the room is Carl Williams IV from Baylor. But the guy who I think actually performed the best in what we saw in the spring game was Devon Benjamin, the true freshman. He looked really good. The caveat there is he was putting the clamps on another true freshman, Hudson Lewis, who I like as a wide receiver prospect, who is also not as highly coveted of a guy as, say, Jalen Lott or Gatlin Bear or as Dakorien Moore was once upon a time. It's not as if he was going up against a guy who's ready to make an impact now. But against a fellow true freshman, man, he looked good. He did have some other reps against non-true freshmen where I also thought he looked good. I have heard good things about Devin Jackson as well. Trey McNutt made a couple of plays in the spring game too. I don't think there was a clear-cut answer. I didn't come out of it in the times that I've gone back and watched the game, which are several. I haven't seen any one guy stand out more than the other. I will say based on, because I've been asked about this before, based on the coverage skills we saw, I don't think Aaron Scott is a guy that's going to slide inside and play nickel. Now, he hits really hard and would be more than sufficient, it seems, in run support to play that spot, which is an important part of playing that nickel back since it's taking the place of a third linebacker on the field traditionally in old school 4-3 defenses. But yeah, I still don't have a major lean. I'm sticking with the grade I gave this room before the spring, which is a B-. I like the talent and the upside. I have never seen any of these guys, nor has anybody, put together a complete season of college football playing the spot. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all going to be a mess or that Oregon won't get any good production here. I might not have graded this room super high coming out of spring last year, and Jaden Kennedy, as the season went on, got stronger and stronger and played his way into being a fourth-round pick to the Chiefs. Deservedly so, even though he's not the biggest guy on the field. But I think amongst the young guys, the one that stood out the most, Devon Benjamin. I thought Xavier Reese, he played a lot of deep safety, but the nickel has to be able to do that with the way they play their defensive backs in that 4-2-5 alignment. Because when they put that rover down, last year was Dylan Thieneman, this year will be Coy Parrish. They often take the nickel and drop him into a too-high shell sort of look. So Xavier Reese also had a really good game, had a really good rep out of the slot in coverage, and also played a little bit on the back end of the defense, and I thought looked really good. And I like Xavier Reese. I thought he was a nice pickup for Oregon in the 2026 class, and he looked like he's pretty ready to go. He is also, body style wise, closer to Jaden Kennedy, whereas Devon Benjamin is much more, and Devin Jackson in the Javon Holland mold if they were to play that spot. So I'm curious to hear your guys' predictions. This remains to me by far the biggest mystery, and it's kind of exciting. It's kind of fun. It's going to be one of those moments when the season kicks off on September 5th. Whenever the defense takes the field first, I'm going to be laser focused on who steps onto the field at that spot. Can't wait to find out. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. So, a question about Oregon's 2026 schedule. Where does the rivalry game against Washington rank in the tiers of Oregon's toughest Big Ten schedule to date? First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. If you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscriptions, spending, and bills can get overwhelming fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. Rocket Money tracks all your subscriptions in one spot and can help cancel the ones you don't need with just a few taps. It automatically categorizes your spending so you can actually see where your money is going, and you can set budgets, get alerts, and stay on top of upcoming bills. It just makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. The link is below, rocketmoney.com/locked on. Check out Rocket Money today. Thank you for making this show your first listen or your first view of the day. If you tune into every episode and you want to level up, join the Locked On Everydayer Club for $5 a month or $50 for the year. You get access to ad-free audio on podcasts, access into our members-only Discord server as well, and other perks too. Click the link in the description below and become a Locked On Everydayer Club member today. Much needed second segment sip. Been doing a lot of stuff today. Went fishing earlier today in the great state of Oregon, where there are many great places to fish. It's glorious. So, been out and about. Got to stay hydrated. Here we go into the good old mailbag. Couple of fascinating SSAs to wrap today's show. Post Star Wars Day SSA. That's May 4th. So it was sent in after that. Oregon's schedule can be separated into these tiers. Must-see TV. Tough game, just win. Game over at halftime. I love the categorization of Oregon's schedule and putting each game into these buckets. So, this SSA has got must-see TV as Ohio State, USC, and Michigan. Hard to argue with any of those. Tough game, must win. You've got Oklahoma State, Illinois, which is on the road, Nebraska, Washington, Boise State. Game over at halftime. UCLA, Northwestern, Michigan State, and Penn State. Okay. I think you're off on a couple here. I'm going to give you a 7 because I think you've done a good job categorizing the tiers like this. Now, there are a couple of different lenses you can approach a particular game. Because they're not down in the gutter, Washington to me is must-see TV because that is rivalry game. A rivalry game. I got caught in between of whether to say a rivalry game or rivalry week, and that was the result, but you understand what I'm going for here. So I'm putting Washington into the top tier because the way you're describing it, must-see TV, well, if you're an Oregon fan, that's not a game you want to miss. At Autzen Stadium, last week of the regular season, as there were last year, likely to be playoff implications. And whether or not there will be any for Washington or, frankly, Oregon is TBD. It's very likely at least one has something on the line as far as the playoff goes. Maybe that's getting in, maybe that's getting a home game or not. And it's definitely possible that they both have playoff implications. And last year, it was set up to where it could have been winner goes to the playoff, and then Washington blew it by losing to Wisconsin and dropped the stakes a little bit from their standpoint, and they still failed to play spoiler, of course. So I'm putting Washington into the top tier for that reason. Do I think Washington is on Oregon's level? No. Could they win? Sure. That wouldn't be the craziest thing I've ever seen. Game over at halftime. UCLA, Northwestern, Michigan State, Penn State. I'm going to raise UCLA up a level. UCLA is a tweener. Game over at halftime? No. And the reason I say that is twofold. Number one, something about the odds makers has them up on UCLA. They like the Bruins. And when coaching changes take place and you look at the way odds move, whether for individual games or for season outcomes, anything like that, before a coach has actually coached a single game at his new school, there tends to be a good reason why. It is not uniform in that regard. The notable example from last year being Bill Belichick, which I, over on Locked On College Football, raised red flags about from the start. They might be better this year, but I never thought that would work. Their win total was 7.5, and when I went through every Power 4 team's win total on Locked On College Football, North Carolina was my first under pick because it was my favorite. That was the easiest one on the board without question. I also hit 58% of those. I felt pretty good about that. So, UCLA belongs at least in the middle. Because it's at home, it shouldn't wind up being a tough game. Bob Chesney, though, has coached against Dan Lanning once before, and he has brought in a high-level transfer portal class. He also has a quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, who's finally going to play at Autzen Stadium all these years later. People who have been with me here on the show for a long time remember that whole saga, and I'm sure you've kept tabs on it from afar. So I would put UCLA in the tough game just win before I would put them in game over at halftime because I trust Bob Chesney, and he's not coming into a disastrous quarterback situation. That feels like a game to me where Oregon wins by double digits, but you kind of feel, frankly, like the last time they played UCLA. You could get caught napping a little bit there. Remember down in LA in 2024 at the Rose Bowl? Oregon went there. It was their first Big Ten game, which is hilarious. And the Ducks were up big going into the half, and then boom, Dylan Gabriel threw a pick six. I believe Brian Addison, the former Duck, took it the other way, 95 yards to the house. And then that game, which you still knew Oregon was going to win, was one that felt not as comfortable as it should. I could see that coming up again. So, yeah, everything else, game over at halftime, Northwestern, Michigan State, Penn State. I mean, Northwestern's respectable and all, but on the road, the game was over at halftime last year, and they might be better with Aiden Childs at quarterback and Chip Kelly's offensive coordinator, but Oregon is also going to be better than last year, and that game is at home. So, yeah, that should be over at the half. Michigan State, talk more about that tomorrow on the show. Penn State, I'm with you there. So, yeah, those are the only major tweaks that I would make. I honestly believe, given Matt Rule's tough track record in big games, I think Nebraska could be a game that gets over at the half. Now, they have a new defensive coordinator from San Diego State, Rob Aurich, who's really good. He was brilliant with the Aztecs last year, led them. I mean, he was the DC, not the head coach. But their defense was the reason they went 9-4 after going 3-9 the season prior. So that's a good hire. They also lost their quarterback. You know, he's backing up Dante Moore this year. And the guy they brought in is, frankly, not as good. He could be fine. It'll probably be Anthony Calandria, the former Virginia quarterback who was the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year with UNLV this past season. He wasn't that good. He was fine, but not great in the ACC at Virginia. So I don't think he's going to Nebraska and suddenly lighting the world on fire. Just a hunch. So I would probably swap UCLA and Nebraska, and I would put Washington into must-see TV just for the rivalry factor. Oregon should win the game. But, yeah, everything else, man, I love that you've got Illinois in there as a tough game, just win. Because the last time the Ducks played the Illini, they beat them pretty soundly, even though Illinois was a good team, top 25, and Oregon beat them. What was it? Oh, I remember that one. That was 38-9 because my predicted score was 38-10, and it was right there. And Brett Bielema, I'll never forgive him for this, went for two for whatever reason. They miss, and it's 38-9 instead of 38-10, and it would have been a perfect score prediction. I'll never forgive him for that. But you got to go to Champaign, and they're resetting at quarterback. I know, and Brett Bielema, I think, has brought the floor up to where they're going to win at least 5 or 6 games every year, and they'll pop up to win 8 to 10 every few years or so, or they're capable of that. They're probably more like a 7-ish win team this year. I wonder what FanDuel actually has their win total at. They have, wait for it, 7.5. Yeah, that seems about right. So FanDuel and I in lockstep agreement there. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good look at it. That's a good set of tiers. If you disagree and you think a team should be in a different tier, let me know. But yeah, I'll put Washington, Ohio State, USC, Michigan, top tier, must-see TV. Tough game, just win. Oklahoma State is also one that I could throw down in the game over at halftime, but they're going to be vastly improved. So it's also on the road. So I like that. But yeah, I'll swap UCLA and Nebraska. And everything else, yeah, I agree. Good takes right there. Another take coming up about one Dakorien Moore. Okay, so before I get to this SSA about Dakorien Moore to wrap today's show, I was prepping for the segment, and I just wanted to have his stats in front of me. And so I pulled them up, and I'm going to try to finish this thought as I'm recording this show. Try to make this as much of a live experience as I possibly can for you guys. Some of you, I kid you not, have indeed left me a comment before because this show airs at 6 a.m. Eastern on both podcast and YouTube. And some of you have sent me a comment. Dude, my man's out here grinding, giving us shows at 3 a.m. I'm not awake. I'm not awake. Anyway, Dakorien Moore last year had 34 catches for 497 yards. Oh, I just got it. And 3 touchdowns. He also ran for a touchdown. 4 carries for 49 yards. I was trying to think of when he caught those touchdowns and in which games. And I had 2, and then as I was just reading that out, it popped in my head when the third was. The first was against Oklahoma State. That's also when he ran for the touchdown. The second one, this is the one I forgot, was against Oregon State on the back shoulder. I want to see a lot more of that in 2026. And the third one was the corner post that he ran against Rutgers, which is the quintessential example of, number one, stars matter, and number 2, this guy can be just a superstar at the position. Most guys don't run routes the way that he did there. And he turns this poor defensive back around for Rutgers. Guy, no chance. So, anyway, I am absolutely buying into a Dakorien Moore breakout emergence, erupt onto the scene, put himself into NFL draft discussions as an early round prospect this upcoming year. And I love the way Evan Stewart looked in the spring game. Having him fully healthy is a boon for Oregon's offense. I chair the Jeremiah McLaughlin fan club because that guy's fantastic and can catch anything that is thrown in something resembling a Yao Ming-like radius. If you just put it in the general area, he's going to get to it. Dakorien Moore is still the guy that I'd pick right now to lead Oregon in receiving yards going into next year. And if any of the numbers that he had last year, 34 catches, 497 yards, 3 touchdowns, if any of those are lower or around the same, he will have either gotten hurt again or I will be severely disappointed. Severely disappointed. So, I'm buying the breakout here. Now, that brings me to the SSA. Dakorien Moore will get drafted ahead of Malachi Toney. I'm putting this at a 6 on the SSA scale. That's redundant because it's Spencer scale of agreement scale. That's redundant. I'm giving this an SSA of 6. That is because I think Dakorien Moore has a big year. I think he is a slightly more well-rounded receiver than Malachi Toney, who is one of the best in all of college football, by the way. To me, has a little bit more gadgetness to his game, and Dakorien Moore, I think, is a more complete receiver prospect. Both are phenomenal, by the way. We're talking slim margins here. This is not some Malachi Toney stinks sort of segment. Darian Mensa to Malachi Toney is going to be a great combination for the Hurricanes this year. Dante Moore to Dakorien Moore should be a great combination for Oregon this year. So Toney right now, if the draft were tomorrow, probably gets taken ahead of Dakorien Moore. But these guys at full strength in a season, I buy Dakorien. And it is close. That's why this is only a 6, but it is not a pure toss-up at a 5 for me either, because I expect him to have a big year. And to me, I would like to see Dakorien Moore have at least 800 yards and at least 8 touchdowns. And at least, he had 34 catches last year. Let's bump that up to 50. I would at least like to see that. If guys go down around him the way it went last year and he has to step up and be the number one guy, he'd go for 1,400 yards. He is talented enough to push for Troy Franklin's single-season all-time Oregon receiving yardage record, which is awesome if you're Dante Moore, because on any given day, he might be his 4th favorite target, or he could be the first. So keep the SSAs rolling in. I appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.